Hey, what's up, guys? It's DarkArmedDuelist and Integrity doing some Silent Swordsman Phantom Knight test hands. So I'm really excited to see you guys because this deck was actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Mimi. And this deck is an amazing deck that can summon out one of the most nostalgic monsters in the entire game, Silent Swordsman, which is a really awesome boss monster that's super consistent to bring out with the Phantom Knight package. So without further ado, guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like in your name description in a single video, getting a signed card sent in the mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month you're a patron, along with test hands. And definitely give Mimi some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such an awesome deck. So let's get straight on into this one, guys. So this deck is super fun to be able to play because you get to summon out that really awesome monster, Silent Swordsman, in both of its forms, in the retrained version and the level 7 version, which is really, really cool. And the Phantom Knight package just brings it out super consistently, especially with what the Phantom Knights can do, putting all sorts of different negates on your side of the field, and they're just super consistent in general, which is really, really amazing. So you guys know it's dad rule number 1, that we gotta pile, shuffle the deck, or you might brick. Even with a super consistent deck like this, you still run the chance. So make sure every time that you duel that you pile shuffle. So this deck is super fun to be able to play, and I really, really love the final fields that it can actually make. So now that we've actually pile shuffled the deck, let's go ahead and see what we can do for our first test hand. So we're going to go ahead and give the deck a quick little shuffle and see what we can do for our first one. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Kagemusha Knight. That's already really good because we're going to get a monster on our side of the field when we normal summon a level 3. A copy of Silent Boots, a copy of Tour Guide. That is really, really good. That's one of the best normal summons in the entire deck, is to get to your copy of Tour Guide. We're then going to draw into a copy of Graph, and finally a copy of our Phantom Knights of Ancient Cloaks. This is a really good hand right off the bat to be able to go in for all sorts of different plays with this setup. So what we're going to do is normal summon out that copy of Tour Guide, and normally what you want to do with this particular setup is summon out Graph, so you can go in for all sorts of different plays. So I'm actually going to special summon the Graph from my hand because you're going to be able to go in for more plays by getting this card out on your side of the field off the Tour Guide's effect. So we're then going to go ahead and link summon into a copy, we're going to normal summon out the copy of Tour Guide, and then special summon out the copy of Kagemusha Knight, then special summon out the copy of Graph off the Tour Guide, because you can actually normal summon the Tour Guide and then chain the effect to summon out your copy of Kagemusha Knight. Then your Tour Guide will resolve, summoning out the copy of Graph. Now we're going to go ahead and link summon into a copy of our Cherubini. Cherubini is really, really important to go into this deck because it has the ability to be able to send a monster from your deck to the graveyard. But your copy of Graph is going to go off since it was summoned off your copy of Tour Guide, to be able to special summon from your deck a copy of your Seer. Seer is very, very important to be able to summon in this particular combo because you're going to be able to bring back your copy of Cherubini from your graveyard. We're then going to use the effect of our Cherubini to send a monster from our deck to the graveyard, which is going to be a copy of either our probably the copy of the Phantom Knights of Torn Scales. Is going to be the best option to actually send to the graveyard because it's going to give us a special summon back from the graveyard, which is always helpful. Now at this point, we're going to go ahead and link summon these two monsters away to summon out our copy of our Rusty Bardiche, which is a very, very awesome card. And then we're going to have the effect of our copy of our Seer go off to special summon back our Cherubini. Now at this point, our copy of Rusty Bardiche is going to send from our deck to the graveyard a Phantom Knight monster to be able to set to our side of the field a card which is really, really good. That's a Phantom Knight Fogblade. We're then going to go ahead and send the copy of our Ragged Gloves to the graveyard to set our copy of Fogblade on our side of the field, which is really helpful to get that card on the field. Now at this point, we have a copy of our Ragged Gloves in the graveyard that we can go ahead and banish to Foolish Burial another Phantom Knight monster, which is super helpful to be able to get an additional one into the graveyard while also having our copy of Torn Scales go off to special summon itself back to our side of the field, because if a Phantom Knight monster is banished, then we have the ability to be able to use that card's effect. So I'm actually going to send from my deck to the graveyard a copy of, say, does it have to be a monster? I believe it does have to be a monster. If this card, you can manage to card from the graveyard to send a Phantom Knight. Oh, it can just be a Phantom Knight card. So we're actually going to send a copy of Wing to the graveyard so we can have a monster Reborn effect, because that's going to help us out a lot to be able to go into our copy of F-Zero, which is really, really, really good to be able to go into F-Zero. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to go ahead and special summon out the copy of Silent Boots, and then use the effect of our copy of Torn Scales to be able to discard this card to the graveyard, which is our Ancient Cloak, to be able to get our play set up. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and overlay both of these on my side of the field to make a copy of our Sea Dragon, which is really, really good to be able to make. Detach a material from it to revive back our copy of our Ragged Gloves, and then you can use the effect to be able to overlay both of these monsters on your side of the field. And we're actually going to make a copy of Dante at this point in hopes that we can actually send from our deck to the graveyard a really powerful card in just a second. So at this point, what we're going to do is we have 2 searches in the graveyard that we can actually pull off, which is going to help us thin the deck a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and banish both of these from the graveyard, banishing the copy of our Silent Boots first to grab a second copy of Fogblade, which is going to help us out a lot to give us an additional monster negate on the field, which is really, really nice. So we're going to go ahead and set that copy of Fogblade to our side of the field, and then we're going to go ahead and banish our copy of Ancient Cloak to be able to set a copy of Shade Brigandine, which is going to help us out a lot again to be able to get that card into our side of the field. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck, and once we shuffle up the deck, we're then going to use the ability of Dante to be able to mill the top 3 cards of our deck. Because once we mill those top 3, if we hit a copy of the Silent Sword Slash, we can actually banish it from the graveyard to be able to search the deck for a copy of our Silent Swordsman, which is really, really good to be able to get to that card. So at this point, what we're going to do is just detach a material from it, which I actually want to get the copy of the Torn Scales in the graveyard to be able to use that effect. So at this point, we're going to mill the top 3 cards of our deck to hopefully get a copy of Silent Sword Slash, and we're actually going to hit Silent Sword Slash, Silent Swordsman, and Silent Sword. Okay, that's literally perfect. That's exactly what we needed to hit. That's really, really good, because this card has the ability that this card can activate its effect, and you can also use the effect that you can banish this card from your graveyard to add a Silent Swordsman from your deck to your hand. It's really cool that we banished both of them, so we can actually get that effect to be able to grab 2 of them. So we're going to go ahead and use the effect to be able to banish that card from the graveyard, and then grab from our deck to our hand a copy of Silent Swords, and that was insane to be able to get both of them. Cool. So I don't believe it's a once per turn effect, so you can actually use both of them with their effects to be able to just banish this card again to be able to get a second copy of Silent Swordsman, that final copy that we don't have from the deck, because we actually sent one to the graveyard, and then we actually just got the other ones into the hand, which is really, really nice. But the only downside is we don't have a warrior that we really want to get rid of right now, so we can totally take care of that with one simple play. So what we're going to do is go ahead and overlay both of these on our side of the field into a copy of our F-Zero, which F-Zero is a really good card to be able to go into, because this card is just so good to be able to XZ summon this card, because this card is just going to make us so many different plays to be able to put on our side of the field, to be able to put a copy of our future Draco on our side of the field, which is just really, really good to put that card on the field. Now again, we're not going to want to use this particular card to be able to go in for our copy of Silent Swordsman, even though it is a warrior. So what we're going to do is actually use that copy of Wing that we sent to the graveyard to be able to banish it to bring back a copy of a Phantom Knight monster, which can be our copy of Ragged Gloves, or it can be Torn Scales, totally up to you which one you want to go for, to be able to then get rid of that card and then summon out your copy of your Silent Swordsman, which is just going to get us that additional monster on our side of the field as a negate, which is really, really cool. Finally summoning out the Silent Swordsman. And this is a really good field setup because you actually have 4 negates on the field with your copy of F-Zero, both copies of your Fogblade, and your copy of Silent Swordsman, which is really good because this card can negate spell cards, because when a spell card is activated, you can negate the activation, which is a really good effect. And this card is also really, really good in your hand or on the field, because it has the ability that you just tribute a warrior monster to summon this card, and it can't be summoned by other ways. And then once per turn during the standby phase, this card just gains 500 attack points, which is really, really nice to be able to boost this card up, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger to be able to have with your opponent having to deal with this card. So this card is really, really nice. We also have the copy of our Phantom Knights of Shade Brigandine that we can just activate during the following turn and summon out an additional copy of our Silent Swordsman to our side of the field, which is really, really cool. So that's pretty much what you'll usually end in the deck with, which is just really, really nice to be able to just end with plays like this, to be able to put your copy of Silent Swordsman on the field, F-Zero, and your copy of your Shade Brigandine set with your copy of your Rusty Bardige in the extra monster zone, because that card is just so good up here because of its pop effect as well when you summon a Dark XZ monster. This is a really good setup as well, because you can, if you want to, go ahead and activate this card and then link these two away to summon out something else, like your copy of your IP Masquerena, if you do want to summon out that IP Masquerena to your side of the field. So then later you can go into your copy of Appaloosa, which is really good, or even go into a copy of Nightmare Unicorn, which is a really, really good play. So let's go into the next one and see what we can do. Just seeing what we top deck, which is a copy of Chaos Space, which is really, really good if we can get to another card, which is just a really awesome effect. That's really cool. That was a really good test hand. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next one, because that was about max potential of what the deck could do. That was totally luck that we actually hit that card. If we didn't, we'd still get some Phantom Knights in the graveyard that we could use for later, which is really nice. I love how well Dante works in this deck to be able to make those really, really insane plays like that you might not have Silent Swordsman, but being able to send Silent Sword Slash to the graveyard is just really good, because it gives you additional ways to get to that card, because you have the 3 copies of your Chaos Space in the deck, 3 copies of Silent Swordsman, which gives you 6, then you have 2 copies of Silent Sword Slash, which gives you 8, and then finally a copy of Rhoda, which gives you 9 copies of Silent Swordsman in the deck that you can get to. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next test hand. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Torn Scales. It's already really good. Fogblade, a copy of Seer. Usually don't want to see that. A copy of Graph, and finally Silent Swordsman level 7. I guess if we get a really, really good hand, sometimes you're going to get a really not great hand, but we can still go into some really good plays with this particular setup. So what we're going to do is go ahead and normal summon out the copy of our Torn Scales to our side of the field. We're then going to use its effect to be able to discard our copy of Fogblade, because this is going to be a little bit more of an awkward hand, but I'm going to show you guys what you can do with these weird hands that you're going to pull in this deck. So we have actually drawn 3 of our kind of sort of bricks in the deck, because these I don't super consider bricks because I can still do something with them, but with the copy of the Silent Swordsman level 7, you kind of get into some weird territory. So what we're going to do is go ahead and use the copy of the Torn Scales to be able to discard a card to send a Phantom Knight card from our deck to the graveyard, which is going to be our copy of our Ancient Cloak, which is actually the best option here, because you can actually banish that card from the graveyard to search out a copy of Silent Boots, which is going to get us another monster on the field so we can go for Cherubini, which is actually going to help us a lot. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and special summon out our copy of our Silent Boots, and then we're going to go ahead and link these two together for our copy of Cherubini. Now, this is where things get a little bit interesting, because you can actually use both of these monsters' effects to special summon to the zones that your copy of Cherubini points to, which is really good to be able to get those monsters on the field, because you're going to get some really good plays. So at this point, I'm actually going to overlay both of these down here, which is going to be a little weird, but we're actually going to overlay these two to make a copy of our Levanir the Sea Dragon, which is a really good play for this particular setup, because then at this point I can go ahead and detach a material, which is the copy of Graph, to bring back my copy of the Phantom Knights of Ancient Cloak. We're then going to use the ability of our Silent Boots to be able to banish itself from the graveyard to be able to summon back our copy of Torn Scales off of its own effects, while also getting a search, which is really, really good. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and grab our copy of Fogblade to our side of the field and be able to put that card face down, giving us our first negate. We could actually go directly for an F0 at this point, but why would we? We can still keep going. So what we're going to do is go ahead and link these 2 monsters away for our copy of our Rusty Bardige, which is a really awesome card to be able to summon, because at this point we can use its ability to be able to send from our deck to the graveyard our copy of our not Shade Brigandine. We're actually going to send to the graveyard our copy of Ragged Gloves. Ragged Gloves is really, really good to send to the graveyard at this point, because we're actually going to get a copy of Fogblade out of it, which is really, really nice. So we're going to go ahead and get that copy of Fogblade, and we can actually go for an F0 at this point. We're not going to get to that copy. Well, we might get to that copy of Silent Swordsman, but let's go ahead and see if we can, because we're going to do that mill again to see if we can get into that card. So what we're going to do is set this card to our side of the field. Then we have in the graveyard a copy of Fogblade, so we can actually bring back our copy of Ragged Gloves to our side of the field and then overlay them together to actually make another play into our Dante. Then we're going to go ahead and see if we can hit it again. I don't think we will, but we might. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck really quick and just see if we can. I hope we do, but I have no idea. So let's go ahead and cut the deck and see if we do. We're going to go ahead and detach a material from it, which we're actually going to detach the copy of our Ragged Gloves, just so we can send an additional Phantom Knight to the graveyard later. And let's see if we can actually hit it. So we're actually going to hit 3 this time, and we're going to see if we can do it. And we're actually going to hit a copy of Ghost Ogre, Kagemusha Knight, and Tour Guide. We actually did not hit it this time, but that's totally fine, because we're actually going to make an F0, which is really good to put on our side of the field to be able to give us an additional negate. Now, we only established 3 this time, but that's totally fine, because getting F0 on our side of the field along with 2 Fog Blades is always really good. We do have a little bit of a brick in the hand, but that's totally fine because we can use it later. So if we're going to go ahead and draw into the next turn, we're going to go ahead and see what we can get. We're going to get a copy of Tour Guide, so we can just go in again, which is really cool, because now at this point you can just normal summon out that Tour Guide, which this card is literally the most powerful normal summon in the entire deck. We're then going to normal summon that Tour Guide and special summon from deck a copy of our Scarm, which Scarm is really good to be able to put on your side of the field, which then we're going to overlay both of these on our side of the field to make a copy of our Leaveneer the Sea Dragon, or you can actually make a copy of Break Sword if you want to, which will give you the ability with your copy of Rusty to pop a card, which is really good, and then Break Sword can pop a card on our field, which is a Fog Blade, giving us an additional Monster Reborn, which is really, really good by just detaching a material like your copy of Scarm, because your copy of your Rusty Bardige also has the ability, which you guys did not know this. This card has a really unique ability that during the main phase, you can send a Phantom Knight card from your deck to your hand, from your deck to the graveyard, and then set a Phantom Knight spell or trap directly from your deck to your spell and trap card zone. And if a Dark XZ monster is special summoned to a zone this card points to, while this monster is on the field, except during the damage step, you can target a card on the field and destroy it. And you can only use each effect of that card once per turn. But that's a really good effect to be able to just get that card, to be able to pop a card, and then your copy of Break Sword can pop a card as well that you don't need anymore, like a copy of Fog Blade, and then you can use that copy of Fog Blade that went to the graveyard to be able to banish itself to be able to get a copy of a Torn Scales back on the field, which is really good to be able to get that card on the field, because then we can use its effect to be able to send a copy of our Silent. Well, actually, you can actually just keep that card. We can actually revive it back in a different way. So let's actually go for a copy of our Ancient Cloak here to bring that card back off the copy of Fog Blade, and then we're going to use the ability of our Ragged Gloves in the graveyard to banish itself, which then will use the effect of the Torn Scales to bring itself back, and then the copy of Ragged Gloves will send a copy of Silent Boots to the graveyard, which then can banish itself, because we haven't used it this particular turn, to be able to get another copy of, say, Fog Blade or Wing, or even a copy of Shade Brigandine, depending on what you want. You can actually just grab it out of the deck with this card, which is really cool. I'm actually going to grab a copy of our Shade Brigandine just to give us an additional monster if we need it to link summon, which is really nice to be able to just climb with that card. And then at this point, you can actually go for a bunch of different cards that we have in the extra deck. You can go for a copy of Leaveneer the Sea Dragon if you want to bring one of your Phantom Knights back. You can go for a copy of Break Sword if you want to summon another one. You can even go for a copy of Access Code Talker, which is really easy to go into with this particular setup, because then at this point, all you have to do is link these cards away, which this will actually banish itself. Since it did leave the field at this point, you'll actually use that ability, but you can actually, before you do, use its ability to discard a card from your hand to send an additional Phantom Knight card from our deck to the graveyard, which is just going to be really helpful. But that pretty much shows how you can actually play with this particular deck. Let's go ahead and see what we can do for our next test hand, because as you guys can see, we can establish some pretty crazy boards in this deck. Let's go ahead and do one more test hand and see if we can pull off a test hand that crazy, because we have an awkward opening hand. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, we had a completely awkward opening hand. That was absolutely weird to draw a copy of Seer and a copy of Graph in the opening hand. That is like one of the worst things that you can pull off in this deck. But you had some really good plays. We had some plays that we could like go back on and be able to still get to that play, because as long as you can get 2 level 3s on your side of the field, you can go for Cherubini. If you can go for Cherubini, you can get your plays really rolling, which is what I was trying to show you guys in that hand. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next one. So let's go ahead and give the deck a quick little riffle and see what we can do for our last test hand. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Foolish Burial, Shade Brigandine, a copy of Kagemusha Knight, Scarm, and finally a copy of Graph. We don't want to draw into those 2, but we can still go into some really good plays because we have Foolish Burial. So we're going to go ahead and use that Foolish Burial in our deck to be able to send a copy of our Ancient Cloak to the graveyard, which then we can banish that copy of Ancient Cloak to be able to grab a copy of Torn Scales from our deck, which is going to help us out a lot, which we're actually not going to shuffle because I'm just going to go right back in. So what we're going to do is normal summon that out to the field and then special summon Kagemusha Knight, set the copy of our Shade Brigandine, and then immediately activate it, because we can activate it the same turn set if we don't have a trap in the grave. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and use the copy of our Phantom Knights of Torn Scales to be able to discard Scarm to the graveyard, which will go off during the end phase to be able to give us a search. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and link summon into a copy of Cherubini, just like we did before. Put that card way up there, and then use its effect to be able to send from our deck to the graveyard a monster that we don't really need, like a copy of our Seer that we might not need to be able to link summon a little bit higher if we want to, or we can just go in for plays in a little bit, which I like to go ahead and just send that copy of Seer in this particular situation, because I'm going to summon back that copy of Scarm into a zone that this card points to, so it's not going to get destroyed. Then special summon out the copy of Graph from the hand, which then you can do the same thing that we did before, kind of when we had that awkward hand, to be able to summon out Levenair, and then we can go ahead and detach the Levenair to be able to summon out the copy of our Ancient Cloak, which is going to be super helpful to get that copy of Ancient Cloak on your side of the field, because now you have something to link climb with, while also giving you one of the pieces that you need to go in for F-Zero. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and link these two away to summon out a copy of our Rusty all over again, and then you basically do the same thing that we did before to be able to use that copy of Rusty on our side of the field to be able to get into some more plays, like using its effect to be able to send from our deck to the graveyard a copy of our Silent Boots to be able to use its ability to be able to set a copy of Fogblade, which is really, really good just to get that copy of Fogblade on our side of the field so we can go in for those really, really good plays. So we're going to shuffle up the deck and see what we can do for the rest of the test hand. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and use the ability of our Silent Boots in the graveyard to banish itself to search out from the deck a spell or trap card that is a Phantom Knight card, which is really good just to be able to get that card from the deck to be able to set it to our side of the field like a copy of Fogblade to give us 2 monster negates on the field, which is going to help us out a lot because at this point we can go ahead and use the effect of our Cherubini, or not Cherubini, but our copies of our Torn Scales to bring itself back to our side of the field, and then link summon these 2 monsters away into a copy of our IP Masquerena. IP Masquerena is really good to be able to put on the field at this point because we do have 2 different level monsters, but we can make a copy of Unicorn at this point if we want to later on, while also being able to go in for some really good plays and giving us some negates on the field. Really kind of a weird hand, but let's go ahead and do one more because that one was a little bit weird to go into, just to make sure that you guys know how to play the deck. It's really good that I actually have a bunch of different test hands on the channel to show you guys about how to play this particular deck, which is really, really nice. If you guys want to check out those, definitely do so. I think I've profiled this twice now, and this is the 3rd test hand, which is really, really cool because this deck is just so good and so fun to be able to play, and I really, really love playing it. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for this particular hand. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of our Psychic Tracker, a copy of Chaos Space, Foolish Burial, Tour Guide, and a copy of E-Telly. Now that is a lot better, so let's go ahead and see what we can do. So what we're going to do is go ahead and activate the copy of Foolish Burial to get a card from our hand into the graveyard, from our deck into the graveyard, which I usually like to send the copy of the Ancient Cloak into the grave because I want to use that copy of Chaos Space that I have in my hand. So I'm going to use the effect to be able to banish this card from the graveyard to be able to search the deck for any one of my Phantom Knight cards that I need, which I'm actually going to search out the Phantom Knights of Shade Brigandine to be able to tribute it off. Actually, I'm going to search out a copy of Torn Scales because I want to get that card in the graveyard with Chaos Space. So we're going to use Chaos Space to be able to send that card from our hand to the graveyard. And then we're going to search out our copy of Silent Swordsman, which is really cool because we're going to go ahead and establish that card on our side of the field because we're going to go ahead and activate our copy of, or actually normal summon out our copy of our Tour Guide. Tour Guide is really good because we're going to be able to get that play. We're actually going to summon out a copy of Graph directly from the deck to be able to go in for Cherubini. So this one we're going to go ahead and link summon into Cherubini, or you can actually wait because this card is actually negated and special summon out your copy of your Psychic Tracker, which is really good to be able to then summon out another monster from the deck like a copy of Ghost Ogre, which is going to give us more monsters on our side of the field just to go in for more plays. So we're actually going to summon out Ghost Ogre off the copy of E-Telly so that we can keep going with our plays. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and link summon these monsters to summon out a copy of Cherubini, which is going to help us out a lot. Doesn't matter really where you summon it, but we're going to go ahead and summon it right here. And then our effect of our graph is going to go off to be able to summon out a copy of Seer from the deck. And since it's in a zone that Cherubini points to, it won't destroy itself, which is really, really good. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and use the effect of Cherubini to be able to send from our deck to the graveyard another Phantom Knight card, which we're actually going to send a copy of Ragged Gloves to be able to banish itself to send an additional Phantom Knight to the graveyard so that we can actually bring back Torn Scales to give us another level 3. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and link these two away and summon out a copy of our Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardige. Rusty Bardige is really good to summon at this point because we do have a graveyard set up, but we haven't actually used Silent Boots, so we can actually get 2 copies of Fogblade, which is really good. So we're going to go ahead and send Silent Boots to set a copy of Fogblade, and then we're going to banish the copy of Silent Boots to set an additional copy of Fogblade, which is actually going to make our copy of Torn Scales go off that we have in the graveyard to put it on our side of the field, which is really good just to get that card back on our side of the field. So at this point, you have 2 copies of Fogblade set on your side of the field, which is really good. You do have the copy of your Ragged Gloves in the graveyard, which can banish itself to get you an additional monster in the graveyard, which we're going to do right now to be able to get that additional card, which is going to help us out a lot to send another Phantom Knight card from our deck to the graveyard, which we're actually going to do what we did in the very first test stand, and we're going to send from our graveyard a copy of our Phantom Knight's Wing, which is going to help us out a lot just to get that monster or get that card in the graveyard to give us a revive so we can actually go for F0 and our copy of our Silent Swordsman. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and overlay both of these way down here to make a copy of our Levenair the Sea Dragon. We're then going to detach a material from it to be able to bring back any of our monsters, which I'm going to bring back our copy of Ragged Glove. Then I'm going to go ahead and overlay these 2 right here to be able to make a copy of Dante, just like we did before. Then we're going to detach that Dante from this card to be able to mill the top 3 of the deck, which we're going to give the deck a quick little shuffle and see what we can hit. So we're actually going to hit a copy of Blackluster Soldier, which is the tech boss monster, Chaos Space, and a copy of Torn Scales, which is not too bad to actually hit, because at this point we can actually use the copy of our Wing to be able to bring back those cards. And you actually would get the copy of Cherubini back because you have the copy of your Seer back, but it's not even that big of a deal because we wanted to have all those zones, and you don't want to leave yourself open every time with Cherubini. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and use the copy of Wing to banish from the graveyard, summon out our copy of Torn Scales, and then tribute it to summon out your copy of your Silent Swordsman, giving you 3 negates on the field. Then we're going to go ahead and overlay both of these into a copy of F0, which is going to give us a copy of our a copy of Utopic Future, which is really good, giving us 4 negates on the field, which is really good. That's really a spicy field. I really like that. With that Silent Swordsman on the field, it's just going to give you so many plays. You don't always have to revive back your copy of Cherubini, because sometimes when you do bring back your copy of Cherubini, you do leave yourself open with that card, with it having just 500 attack points. So it depends on what you're playing against if you want to bring it back, which is why I wanted to show you guys what actually happens if you don't bring it back. You just have a really solid field like this. And if your opponent does destroy this card, the really cool thing about this card is it has the ability that if this card if this card is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, then you can special summon, or excuse me, it has the ability that if this card is destroyed by battle or by card effect and its owner's control is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, then you can just special summon out a copy of Silent Swordsman. So if it does get destroyed, you do get to summon out that copy of Silent Swordsman level 7, which does negate all spell effects, which is pretty good to be able to just negate all the spells effects, negate monster effects, and then negate monster effects, which is really good. The only thing at this point that you got to worry about is your trap effects, which usually this deck doesn't have a problem with anyways, which is just really cool because you get out your copy of Silent Swordsman level 7. So I think that's going to do it for this one, guys. This deck is super fun. We had some awkward test hands, but that's totally fine. I like to show those just to show you guys how powerful the deck actually is to be able to go in for all of those plays. We didn't get to show it off in this particular test hand, but if you do open up Chaos Space and a copy of Silent Swordsman and any dark monster, you can just basically search out your copy of Blackluster Soldier instead of searching Silent Swordsman, which was the tech boss monster that was playing in the deck that I was going to show you guys. But we didn't actually run into a situation that we needed it, so we didn't summon it, which is totally fine. But it's a really good card late game that if you want to go for. So anyways, guys, I think that's going to do it for this one. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can come part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the other test hands for this deck on the channel. They're really, really awesome to really learn how this deck works. It's really amazing, and it's super fun to be able to play. If you guys would like, check out the deck profile. It is down in the description down below. So anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.